Hello and welcome to the final Westeros.org bonus materials for Season 3. This is for our review and recap of Episode 10, Mhysa. I'll be handling some highs and lows and some overall comments on this episode, and Elio will be discussing guest right.
So for this episode, what I'd like to discuss is guest right. Now, we have the story from Bran about the rat cook, the monstrous cook who fed the Andal King's son to him at a meal, and he was so good he went back for seconds, and the gods punished the rat cook by turning him into this monstrous white rat who lurks in the night for eating his own children. And as Bran says, it's not because he killed the Andal King's son, it's not because he fed him to him, it's because he broke guest right. Guest right is the ironclad rule in this society. It is the most important single sort of injunction. It is a taboo. It is anathema to break it. This is historical. George is drawn from history. It's an ancient thing. Lots of cultures have had this notion that you protect your guests. You have a formal extension. This sort of guest-host relationship is sort of formalized, and it was created as a way to negotiate a way for peaceful interaction between rival tribes, rival groups. How can you make peace? How can you make alliances if you can't even be sure that when you visit someone they won't kill you? So you have to have this whole relationship. The Greeks had it, the Celts had it, everyone had this notion back in the ancient world. And George has drawn from history not only in that sense, but the actual Red Wedding from the previous episode, that is based on the Black Dinner, a Scottish event that was somewhat similar in the sense that somebody was invited to a feast and then brutally murdered. Now, it is ironclad. It is the top rule. There's other things you're not supposed to do. Kinslaying, killing your own kinsman, but the guest right is like the biggest thing. And the fact that the Freys are willing to break it, it's part of the general sense that things are falling apart in the Seven Kingdoms. The war, the conflict, the anxieties, the tensions are starting to break the fabric of a society. This is something that in the novels is a bit clearer because they spent more time just showing the impact of the war in a broader sense. We often get very narrowly focused on the impact on the Starks and the Lannisters. But this novel starts to open up and say, there's a lot of people being affected. There's a lot of things falling apart. And in the end, guest right it's part of a social compact. It's all these notions, laws today, they're all part of a social compact that we agree to follow them because it's in our best interest, and because in the sense of the whole society's best interest. It is the best interest of society, but everyone agree to basic traffic laws that you drive on a certain side of the road and not another. Nothing stops you. You could decide to go the other way, but you put yourself in immense danger, you put everyone else in immense danger. If everyone agrees to the same rules, that danger disappears, or is greatly lessened. But as soon as someone says, well, I don't have to do this, who cares, right? Who's going to do anything to me? It gives me an advantage, I'll win. It makes a difference. Do the gods even exist in the setting? Will they actually curse the Freys? Well, my part is, I don't think that there are gods in the setting. I think there's magic and people attributed to gods. But, the Frey is making the calculation that, the Seven aren't going to touch him, the old gods aren't going to touch him, there's no problem. He's won. He's had his revenge. He's on the winning side. He's getting his reward. That's all that matters to him. And that is the story of a lot of how the bad guys win in this series. The good guys tend to believe in this social compact. They tend to play by the rules. And so those who break the rules but often profit by it. And we'll be seeing more of that, I think, in the next season.
To start off the commentary on this episode, I thought I would address something that I've seen discussed a bit on Twitter and on the forums and so on, where people will go and say, oh my god, the Reigns of Castamere was such an epic episode. 10, before they saw 10, this has to be, even better, this has to really top it, what are they going to do? And it doesn't really work that way. when you have a, huge explosion of events that you had in the Reigns of Castamere, you have to pull back. You have to calm things down a bit. You have to tie up some loose ends, and you have to give people a chance to breathe. So all of those that went into episode 10 expecting amazing things, they were probably quite disappointed, because it is, on the whole, a fairly talky episode. It had to be a talky episode. So I'm not disagreeing with that at all. But I do think it may have ended up being a little too talky. It is, I believe, the longest episode of the season. It is certainly the longest episode that I subtitled, because I subtitled for one of the channels in Sweden that shows the series, and there was a lot of text to get in. And that really showed that there was too much being squeezed in, and again, they should probably try to wrap some of these storylines earlier. Perhaps not in 9, because that was too momentous, but they could have wrapped some things in 8, and they could just have held off on some things, and I'll get back to that in a little bit. I'll start with some of the other problems that we had. We felt that the Tyrion and Sansa scene was a really problematic sort of relationship scene, because all of a sudden they seem to be getting along just fine. And I mean, this plays into the whole problem we have with Tyrion being whitewashed and being so much more of a nice guy, and here he and Sansa are, chatting and gossiping and starting to make plans to pull a prank on a lord and all of these things. And it seems like they wanted to set up, oh, look at this, now things are going to work out for them. And then, of course, Tyrion gets the news about the Red Wedding, and the next time we see Sansa, she has also gotten the news, and you're basically getting the sense of, well, this marriage to a Lannister probably isn't going to work out after all. So it seems like they really inserted that scene just to, again, pull the rug out from underneath you and sort of, haha, you thought it was going to work out. So, not a fan of that one. And another Tyrion scene that we felt was problematic was his scene with Cersei, in the sense that, as you know, we don't like Cersei's characterization much, but fine, they changed it, and that's how it is. But here she's going on about how unhappy she was and how she would have killed herself if it wasn't for her children, because she didn't have anyone before she had Joffrey. What about her beloved brother, her beloved twin, Jaime? Especially when later in the episode we see Jaime come in, scruffy, one-handed Jaime, and her disappointment that you can see when she looks at him and realizes how he has changed. Wouldn't it have been lovely to contrast that with her mentioning how much she missed Jaime? She doesn't have to give away to Tyrion if she still wants to pretend that there's nothing untoward going on between her and Jaime. Everyone knows that she loves her brother. But they just talked about her children, and yes, she loves her children. She'll do anything for her children. But she also really, really, at this point anyway, loves her brother, or feels that he's a really important part in her life anyway. So that was just strange with that other scene. And finally, something that we felt that could have been taken out of this episode, or at least cut back severely, is that we get 2 scenes, and I think they're back to back, with Davos and Gendry, and then Varys and Shay dwelling a lot on, the plight of the common people, basically. And while we missed that when they were dealing with the Brotherhood without banners, some insight into what they were doing to help the people of the Riverlands, here it feels very forced to use these focal point characters to bring it up, especially at this point. And we really don't know what to think about the characterization of extremely altruistic Varys, who goes out of his way to tell Shay that, well, I do want you to leave for Tyrion's sake, but the money I'm giving you is, I'm giving you all these diamonds just because I really want you to have a good life. We're not really sure that it's actually Varys. But there were good things about this episode. Absolutely no doubt about that. The look that Tywin gives Joffrey when he sends him off to bed, when Joffrey has told him that he was hiding under Castle Rock as Joffrey's real father Joffrey's father won the war. That look is priceless, and that is why Charles Dance is perfect as Tywin. The scene rambles on a bit after that. There were we wish they could have used that to set up Dawn, for example, as is done in the books. Instead, he goes on about family again. But the acting from Charles Dance is always extremely good. We also thought that the John and Ygritte scene played out very well. There's some strong, intense emotions on the screen. I think both actors do a fine job, and it really drives the point home about the problems in their relationship, you could say. And finally, the final scene. We have overall been very happy with Dany's story, and the final shots of the episode are suitably epic. They are perhaps not as momentous and wondrous as the final shots of the first season with the birth of the dragons, but it's hard to live up to that. We did feel that the start of the scene felt kind of awkward and stagey, and it's lacking some of the exhilarating feeling that you get from the books, when I think partly it's really, again, they're cutting out her being mounted and all of that, so it's very stagey when she's walking out among them. But the final shots with the pulling out and having the dragons flying up and the music, all of that is a really good finish to this episode and to this season.
And that is it for our discussion of the Mhysa, and we are going to do a sort of season 3 review overview discussion video with Linda and I talking about it a bit, sharing our views overall. I will say in brief, we're going to say that this is a better season than last season. It's more consistently good. Some of the real pitfalls that they had last season haven't really shown up, but we have our disappointments. We have things that we felt didn't live up to what the potential was, and I want to stress, we review these things by the potential we see in the material that they have to adapt and how well they execute it. They can execute it really well, but they could be below the potential, and we're going to say it. We're going to treat that as a problem. So if you don't like that, don't bother watching. Until then.